Hey, good morning, everybody. I'm Michael Benner, and this is Wisdom of the Soul, brought to you by the Ageless Wisdom Mystery School. Sure appreciate you being here live today, and any Sunday morning, 11 a.m. California time, that you're able to be here live. We really appreciate it. If not, you can watch the whole video on YouTube, search Ageless Wisdom Mystery School, or listen to the podcast, which is edited. We take out the meditation and we take out the Q&A. So it comes down to about 25 to 35 minutes, pretty much just the instruction. And that's an option for you also if you like audio podcasts. And who doesn't? People tell me sometimes they don't listen to podcasts. You don't know what you're missing. So much wonderful material available through podcasts. I was just looking at my archives the other day. Between the podcast that I've been doing since 2008 and the podcast that I did with my business partner, Steve Snyder, we're at just over 800 podcasts, 550 on my stream alone. So it's hard to believe. A lot of material available there. And then there are so many similar podcasts of thinkers, philosophers, and just fun stuff too. Entertainment, all kinds of cool stuff. My goodness. Check out the podcast world. And ours is commercial free. They used to all be commercial free. Ours always will be, just like this class. Thanks again for being here. Life is but a dream is our topic for the day today. That has multiple meanings. Life is a dream in that what we perceive as some objective reality, I was going to say absolute, but that's not quite right. Let's say objective reality that we find ourselves living in and experiencing is not really as objective as it appears to be. Elements of it are very subjective, and the argument can be made that it is entirely a subjective experience, that we can stand side by side, be very similar in many regards in terms of our culture and our background, our education, and our past experience. And still, those standing side by side at the same moment have entirely different experiences of what we call reality. An example I often use is, in fact, we mentioned it recently, but it bears repeating. If we're traveling in an automobile, let's say, through a beautiful area, some wilderness, a national park, and one of us is sick, has the flu, we're not having the same experience of that place. Our reality, it's like, hey, Michael, look at that beautiful waterfall. Yeah, nice waterfall. But I'm miserable, I'm sick. Or maybe less obvious if I'm perfectly well and healthy in a physical sense, but I'm in emotional turmoil. I'm upset. I just, had an argument with someone in my family, or the dog died, or I just got a bill from the IRS that I wasn't expecting, and it puts me in a bad mood, in a funky place. Then my experience of so-called objective reality is going to be very different. So again, it could be argued, well, reality doesn't change, you change, but it seems pretty inseparable. Isn't, for whatever its subjective nature, our perception of reality always subjective? You know the phrase, life is what you make it? If our theme today is life is but a dream, let's factor in this other aphorism. Life is what you make it. That's pretty profound. Life is what you make it. And it's easily argued against, but it really merits some insight. So if life is a dream, a lucid dream, life is what we make it, we're contributing to the experience of a reality that is always, at least in part, subjective and arguably entirely subjective, then we can learn to be more mindful rather than mindless, less robotic, less automatic, and awaken to the freshness, the newness of every moment. If life is a dream, what happens when you wake up? And that's what we're going to talk about today. Waking up to a more mindful understanding of what we call reality and agree upon as reality, but experience uniquely. Having said that much, let's do an opening meditation. And on the other side of that, we'll delve into our topic of the day a little more deeply. So if you'll close your eyes and relax, get nice and comfortable in your chair or wherever you happen to be, sitting on a sofa or cross-legged on your bed or meditation pillow on the floor, meditation bench, whatever suits you. Close your eyes and get centered and balanced and begin to relax. And take a couple of nice, slow, deep breaths, inhaling fully. And as you exhale, create and sense a letting go feeling. Do that a few more times. Pulling in strength and power as you inhale. And as you exhale, feel the letting go. Beyond where you'd normally stop, all the way out, all the way out. And each time you breathe in and out, slow it down a little bit more. Maybe you count 1 to 4 on the in-breath and 1 to 4 on the out-breath. But after 3 or 4 breaths, maybe it's 6 or 8 on the in-breath and the out-breath. Slow it down. Which is easier to do as you become more and more relaxed. Feel that unwinding. Create and sense that dropping of tension. That suit of armor that we wear, the sword and the shield, put it down. Allow yourself to feel vulnerable. Remind yourself just how safe you are, sitting where you sit, in this place, at this time. You're very safe. And can become even more deeply relaxed. Feel the letting go. And begin to breathe normally. Turn your breathing over to autopilot. That's another letting go, isn't it? Letting go of deliberate breathing and allowing your body to breathe itself. As you identify as the witness of the breathing, the watcher, the observer, and gently place your awareness on the bottom of your nose. At the very point where breath enters and leaves your body, Allow your attention to settle there effortlessly and simply observe. This is breathing in, and this is breathing out. Nothing more complicated than that. And allow yourself to become interested, curious, even fascinated by the concept of your body breathing itself without us having to monitor it. Even when asleep or otherwise unconscious, the body breathes itself. And it can feel like our body is being breathed for us. Consider for a moment or two, as the observer from the point of view of the witness, the watcher, who or what is breathing me? Who or what monitors my heart, my pulse, and my blood pressure? Is it enough to say it is autonomic and that the brain is doing it? Or is there something beyond that, acting through the brain and our autonomic nervous system? Who or what orchestrates our being? And as we perceive of some higher power, possibly, do we separate ourselves as if we are puppets? Or do we identify with that higher self? And if so, what do we call it? In our society, God comes to mind. But along with it, images of a being, human shaped, living elsewhere outside its creation, remotely, though petitionable by prayer, we're told. But of course, we have volition, we have free will. But more than that, what if we consider that divine aspect, that God, so-called, to be awareness itself. Could you say, I am that? Understandably confused and limited in our view, we believe we are our thoughts in time and our perception of the world in space. But what part of us thinks? And who is it that perceives? Is it the little self, the persona, the ego, the individual, alienated from its source? Or can we elevate our perspective and consider that we are what we notice? We are the awareness that is aware of being aware. And noticing what we notice. For example, think of something you know well, an object, a possession, a relationship, or a circumstance. Trust your first impression. What comes up for you quickly and immediately when I suggest something you know well? And then, in a playful way, consider what you know about it. That which you've confirmed in your mind long ago. And because you know it well, it's likely that it's something that you enjoy. Consider why you enjoy it. And how it is that you've come to know it so well. Again, an object, a relationship, a circumstance or event. And now ask yourself, silently and internally, what do I not know about this? And as you come up short, consider, how would I know what I do not know? How would I know if I didn't know that there was something here I did not know? Is that too much? How would I know if I did not that was something I, in fact, did not know? How would I know that? How would I be aware of what I do not know? Unless there is some aspect to I, me, mind that we don't know very well. Some elevated perspective, some higher self that could become aware of what we do not know. Think of times that we suddenly, as if by revelation or epiphany, realize something that we had not known before. It could be a wonderful feeling. Oh my, far out. How cool. I never realized. Or it could be a cause for concern or anxiety, trepidation. Oh no, I just realized. Oh my. And would it be in our interest to be more aware of our ability to promote that awareness? To awaken from the dream that says you know things. Living life by rote. Habitually. Based on what you already know and therefore have no need to discover. There's an example I must attribute to the mindfulness researcher Ellen Langer, who often opens her addresses by asking her audience, how much is 1 plus 1? And we presume we know that 1 and 1 is 2. And then she happily points out that that's not always the case. And she says, if you have a bunch of dirty laundry and you throw it into the pile with the other dirty laundry, 1 and 1 equals 1. Or if you're chewing a stick of gum and you add a second stick of gum to your mouth, and you don't have 2 pieces of gum in your mouth for very long, do you? Before it becomes 1 again. But we say, wait a minute, that's an objection I learned long ago as a child, as a very young child, that 1 and 1 always equals 2. Well, how much more have we learned that becomes settled science, and we believe we know things, even things that may seem unique to ourselves that are just not true. But because we believe them to be true, they manifest according to our belief system as if life were a dream. What limitations have we learned that we accepted long ago and continue to act out as part of the story we tell ourselves about ourselves? Oh, I'm no good at that. Oh, I tried that. didn't work. I couldn't do it. I tried that. I told you I tried that. Ooh, notice how defensive we get, guarding our limitations and protecting ourselves from being exceptional. Who are we defending? Why are we defending our limitations? Why do we believe we need a defense? If life is a projection and a perception, then it's subjective. And quantum science confirms this. What do we experience beyond thought and perception? Thinking in time and perceiving in space. The 3 dimensions of space and the 4th dimension of time. We think in time. You think about the past. You think about the future. Both of which are contained in your imagination. Your memory is imagined. Your conception of the future is imagined. You're dreaming it up. Past and future is a dream. And yet the present, we believe, is not. We think in time, we perceive through space. We perceive our emotions and our senses and sensations. All of which are electrical impulses in your brain. Our entire view of reality is conceived of and perceived by the brain. Not out there, but behind your forehead and between your ears. You're making it all up. I'm not saying it doesn't exist out there as energy. But what you see when you look at the moon may not be what I see when I look at the moon. The way we see it, what we notice about it, what it brings up for us emotionally is unique. Perhaps we should accept ownership of that subjective perception and not get so frustrated when others don't share it, for they have their own view of the moon and everything else in the world. It's understandable that we would disagree from time to time. In fact, it's surprising we agree on as much as we do. Think about when you were a little kid, the neighborhood you grew up in. And then right now, in your mind's eye, walk up and down the street. Imagine you going 3 or 4 houses either side of where you live. And I'll bet you can still remember pretty clearly in your mind's eye what each one of those houses looked like, how it was different, what distinguished this house from that house, even though they were similar in many ways. Notice how familiar you were and are, as you recall now, with the somewhat subtle distinctions of each and every house in your neighborhood when you were a kid. And now think about the neighborhood where you live now and how indistinguishable the houses appear to be. It's because the brain decided long ago, your brain and my brain and everybody else's, that we know what a house looks like, and so it gets lazy and loses its ability to distinguish. And in this way, we become mindless, and we overlook so much of reality, we miss it. But to become mindful deliberately and purposefully, to awaken from the dream, is to notice what you notice and begin to notice what you have not noticed before. This is awakening. Consider something as before that you're familiar with. And later today and later this week, commit yourself to a practice of just a few minutes at a time, becoming aware of what you do not know and have not been aware of about this familiar object or circumstance, this condition or event, or relationship. Could be. Gets really complex with relationships, doesn't it? This is beginner's mind. Looking and seeing something you're familiar with as if you'd never seen it before, as if you were a beginner with a new, fresh outlook, uh, and a sense of curiosity that somehow we've allowed to atrophy. Wake up from the dream. Wake up from the mindful trance. Be alive. Be in it, if not of it. Life itself. Realize its newness in every moment. Smell the freshness of now unfolding. New again, new again, new again in each moment. Get hip to the trick. There's a lot here. Give yourself a break. Cut yourself some slack. Take your time pondering mindfulness, awaking from the dream, especially when it becomes nightmarish. Ever had a bad dream, a nightmare, and you awaken with a sense of relief? Oh my God, thank goodness it was only a dream. If we can do that when we awaken from sleep, perhaps we can awaken from our self-imposed torment, our suffering, our anguish, sense of conflict in the world, our disappointment when our desires are not met, when we don't get to have everything the way we want it to be. We can wake up, say, oh, my, thank goodness it was only a dream, something I thought up. Prepare to return to the wide awake state, to wake up from this dream by simply forming the intention to do so. Experience a gentle rising up, like slowly awakening in a weekend morning. And 3, eyes open now, wide awake. Open your eyes now. Back in the room, feeling fine, rested, refreshed, better than before. Take a nice, slow, deep breath, and as you exhale, feel the letting go again. More relaxed, feeling better than before. Good. I'd like to talk more in the next few weeks about mindfulness and mindlessness. The only things that we should do habitually by rote are things that we already do very well and have no need to improve upon. And that should be a conscious decision, not just something, again, that we habitually fall into. It could be something like brushing your teeth. Maybe there's a better way to brush your teeth. Maybe if you paid attention to brushing your teeth while you brushed your teeth, you'd do a better job of brushing your teeth. But I would think that most of us do that automatically by rote while we're thinking about other things. Maybe you've got the radio on and you're singing along. Maybe you've got the radio on and there's also a TV in the other room and you're thinking about some problem that you anticipate having to revisit later in the day. Multitasking, has been shown not to improve productivity, but actually to degrade productivity. In working in business, doing seminars and consulting, I have on many occasions encountered people that didn't believe that would argue vehemently with me about that. Oh no, I have to multitask. I get so much more done. It's an illusion. You don't. Not only do you get less done by attempting to multitask, but you're more likely to forget what you've done because you weren't paying attention, you weren't aware of it while you did it. You don't remember whether you did it or not. You can't find this. You don't know what you did with that. You forgot this and you overlooked that, and you have little or no memory of it. Multitasking is the worst thing in the world. Unless you're in danger, you know. Sure, we can find exceptions, but generally speaking, it's not a good idea. Do one thing at a time, do it mindfully. If it's worth doing, it's worth doing well and doing mindfully. Pay attention to what you're doing while you're doing it. You will love it a lot more. You'll enjoy yourself. To be present in the moment. That's awakening from the dream, isn't it? We'll talk more about mindfulness, noticing what you notice, and noticing that exalted I that is doing the noticing. Because that exalted awareness can watch the behavior of the lower self that you've always thought of as who you are. We do that a little bit when we judge ourselves, right? Oh boy, that was stupid of me. I wonder why I did that. Or, yeah, I'm pretty ashamed of myself. I'm embarrassed for having done that. Well, who are you then? Are you the person that ought to be ashamed, or are you the person that realized you could have done that better and really screwed it up? And it's much easier to forgive yourself when you recognize you are that higher self, that exalted, or if you don't like that word, that elevated perspective of I am that. Tastyam yasi in Sanskrit. Thou art that. Consider who you are in a dream. Consider the character that you are in a dream. I will grant you that sometimes in a dream, you may feel as if you're sort of a narrator. Like when you read a book, there is often the voice, third person of, is it third person or first person? That narrator voice that is not dialogue, it's not attributable to any particular character. You, as the reader, are supposed to identify as this voice experiencing. Sometimes, even in film or TV shows, there will be this off screen, invisible voiceover, especially at the beginning of a movie. It sort of sets the scene. Well, sometimes when we have a dream, a night dream, you're asleep and dreaming. When you awaken in the morning and remember that dream, though there are such things as lucid dreams, in which case we're aware of dreaming while we're dreaming, it gets a little more complex. But most dreams are recalled only upon awakening in the morning. And they're likely to be the dream you just had, rather than something from earlier in your sleep cycle. We dream about 5 or 6 minutes every 90 minutes or so. And throughout the night, each dream gets a little bit longer, 5 minutes, 6 minutes, 7 minutes. And the period between them gets a little bit shorter, just by a few minutes. But roughly every hour and a half or so, you have a dream of about 5 minutes. So the one you're likely, or most likely to remember when you awaken in the morning is the one you just had, especially if it's emotionally impactful. And so maybe you recall this dream from the point of view of that narrator. But more often than not, it's much more likely that you are a character in that dream. And you might say, yeah, that's me in the dream. Well, is it? Is your dream full of only people that you know and only landscapes that you're, that you're familiar with? I don't think so. Dreams are full of strangers. Sometimes there'll be someone you know, or a character that reminds you of someone you know, or you realize, well, they symbolize somehow a person that I know. But a lot of them are strangers. Most of the characters in your dreams are strangers. And the situations you find yourself in, the places, you may revisit certain places in your dreams. But most often they bear little or no resemblance to places in your waking state. They can, but think about it. Most of the characters in your dreams are strangers. Most of the places that you find yourself in are new and strange and different. And unless you really are good at thinking about symbolism and metaphor and allegory, the bulk of what you dream makes little or no sense and has, it would appear on the surface anyway, to have little or nothing to do with your waking life. It's a dream. And again, if it's got a negative connotation, it gets increasingly nightmarish. That's the word that we use for bad dreams, negative dreams, dreams that hurt and frighten us, scary dreams. But my point in bringing this up is that the character that you are in that dream has little to do with who you are in the waking state. That's not really you. And further, what happens to that character that you are in the dream upon awakening? Do they die, only to be reborn in the next dream? Or if you redream a dream, sometimes you may fall back asleep and you pick up the dream where you left off. What happens to you, the character you are in the dream, when you wake up? Do you feel a loss? Like a friend died, or the dog died, or someone you love passed away? It's not likely. It's just a easily accepted awareness that, oh, that was a dream. And that character that you were in the dream was just a dream. Do you feel a loss? And so if this is a dream, where do you go when you die? We hear this a lot. Even kids, maybe especially kids. Mommy, daddy. Well, religion has constructed two options, right? Heaven and hell. Even Eastern philosophies have their heaven and hell. Buddhists believe in several planes of hell, at least three that I know of, degrees of hell. But a Buddhist doesn't think of hell as a place or a destination, but rather a mental emotional condition, a reality that arises as a reflection of your karma. So you don't go to hell, you live in hell. And we all know that experience. We've all had hellish experiences. This is hell, this is torture. Oh my God. I was thinking of those Proud Boys today. just got sentenced to, what was it, 18 years in prison for the January 6th insurrection. They're already complaining about the food. They're in hell. Moldy bologna sandwiches for 18 years. I'm the first to admit prisons need reform. I've been, in my work with law enforcement, in prisons and jails. We treat animals better than we treat people in prison. You don't even want to know. It's such a nightmare. But that's another story for another day. It's almost as if they woke up from their dream of revolution. These guys thought they were friggin' Thomas Jefferson and George Washington, and that by overthrowing the government, they were revolutionaries. They were going to create a new government. And they woke up, found themselves in court. And then they woke up and found themselves in prison. Well, they woke up too late. And a little bit of reflection, I'm sure that you and I will agree there are many times, maybe not as severe as finding yourself in prison, but many times in our lives where we awoke to the consequences of our behavior. And they were negative and hurtful and full of torment and horror. And we say, my God, what was I thinking? What did I do? What did I do? And why did I do that? It must have been something I was thinking or feeling. Well, what was I thinking and feeling that led me to the behavior that resulted in this consequence? And you sort of daisy chain your way back. If you're a clear and lucid thinker, what was my intention in thinking and feeling the way I thought and felt, so as to speak the words I spoke and behave in the way that I did that got me in this horrible situation? And then behind intention, see, if you daisy chain your way back from the consequence to the behavior, including speech, to the thought, to the feeling, to the intention, what's behind that? Where does this all begin? With awareness or the lack of it? I guess I just didn't think it through. Oh, yes, you thought it through. I speak from personal experience. We've all got times like, oh, I woke up when I realized the consequences of my behavior. I wasn't aware. I didn't think. Or if you want to call it thinking, it was habitual. It was rote. Or it was following the crowd. When I was in the 5th or 6th grade, I was hanging with 4 or 5 of my buddies on summer vacation, and there was a skating rink where I grew up in Michigan that they would flood. It was an entire city block, and they would flood it in the winter with big fire hoses and let it freeze over, and then they would spray it at night and make it nice and smooth so the next morning you'd have this wonderful, huge skating rink. And over in one corner was a warming shed. We called it a shed. It was pretty big. This is almost as big as it was the size of a small house, but it was just one big room, and it had a coal burning or wood burning stove in it where you could warm up. And You could go in and buy hot chocolate or coffee. And there was a guy there you could pay to sharpen your ice skates and such. Well, this place was boarded up in the summer, as you could imagine. And a bunch of us were hanging out there playing baseball or football or whatever. And somebody said, let's go in the warming shed. Well, it's closed. It's boarded up. You can't go in there. And I think the reason was that they had records. 45s they used to play. When people would skate, they'd play 45s. Had like kind of a DJ in there. And we wanted the records. I think that was the deal. We were going to steal the records. The 45 RPM vinyl. And so, yeah, we're all up for it. Everybody goes over. Somebody pries the door open, and these kids all go inside. And I stood there terrified, thinking, we're going to get caught. We're going to get in trouble. And the parenting in my home was pretty severe. If I screwed up, I caught holy hell. There was severe consequences in my house. So I stayed outside, not because I was more moral or ethical than my buddies, who all streamed inside, just because I was more frightened. And of course, we all got caught. And boy, was I relieved. Even though my intention was not that of a moral, upstanding, good kid, Eagle Scout, or whatever, just because I was afraid. I had a lot of fear in my life as a kid. But I got credit for being a good boy. And I sure liked that feeling. And everybody else got in trouble. Not big trouble. They don't send 12-year-olds to jail or detention, or I don't know, maybe they had to stay after school and clean erasers or something. But our lives are full of examples where we just didn't think. And the point of me talking about this today, and I'd like to go to some Q&A here and see if we can have some conversation about this. One way of talking about life as a dream is the mindlessness, the zombie-like trance in which we live. And the point is, it hurts to be mindless. Our lives are filled with unnecessary suffering because we'd rather live in a trance, live by rote, do things autonomically, and escape in our fantasies. What is television but an escape? I'm not opposed to an occasional escape. If I pick up my guitar, I escape. Or create a new reality, depending on how you look at it. If I, in my photography hobby, start pouring through JPEGs on the computer and labeling them and organizing them and, do some sort of Photoshop process or Lightroom process to the JPEGs, that's escapist. Or arguably creating a new reality. But are we doing it mindfully or mindlessly? The rewards for being ever more mindful are ineffable. You really can't find the words. Think of the peak experiences in your life. The most exciting, the most wondrous, the most awesome, cool, gratifying experiences you've ever had. You were wide awake. You were like so hyper aware, and it felt so good to be awake. Why wouldn't we want to live there all the time? On the cutting edge of now, rather than lost in thought, trying to reconcile past memories. I guess that's redundant. Trying to reconcile memory and plan the future, missing the only thing that's real, the present moment. Again, we think in time, we perceive in space. Our whole sense of space is a perception. It's all in your mind. You don't see the flower, you see light reflected off the flower. Okay? The fragrance of the flower is conceived in your brain. What's the likelihood that two people smelling the same flower have the same experience? Even wine tasters, they get really good at tasting and describing the complex flavors of a really good wine and the way those flavors unfold. I made salsa yesterday, and I was anxious to eat it, so I didn't let it sit and the flavors of the garlic and the onion and the chilies and the tomatoes and the lime juice and they hadn't really come together as one thing yet. You really should make it several hours before, or maybe even overnight. Then all those flavors come together. So they were still sort of standing apart. And when you ate the salsa, the flavors would come in layers. Well, a sophisticated, not that I am, I'm really not a wine drinker, but someone who loves fine wines, they will they will talk to you about the way those flavors unfold. I always used to get a kick out of Fraser and Niles and that that old TV show Fraser, because they were such wine snobs and supposed connoisseurs in describing the way flavor unfolds. But that's a level of awareness, you see, that if you're drinking box wine, you're not really interested in. It's just, is it red or is it white? Is it cold or is it room temperature? And you throw it back like it's a tumbler of tap water or something. There's so many different ways we could apply this. Somebody who loves baseball goes to the park with somebody who would rather be at a football game. They don't really like baseball. You're going to have two entirely different experiences. And the one who loves it's going to be more awake and more mindful and know much more about the game and what just happened. And they're observing all kinds of things that the person that doesn't care and doesn't understand and further doesn't really want to know is going to miss out on. My God, we can't afford to live our whole lives that way, not caring. Many people say to you, I couldn't care less. I just don't care. Well, doesn't that mean you're not a caring person? Is that a good thing you would want to brag about? Or, as an aside, sort of makes me bristle when people say, I could care less. It's like, that's not a thing. I could care less. It's, I could not care less. I couldn't care less. That makes sense. One of my pet peeves, a sign of people who are not reading. I want you to care more. Care about everything. Be interested. Wake up. Be alive. Don't waste this lifetime. Don't waste this day. Don't waste this hour. Don't waste this breath. Awaken from the dream. Okay, Melinda, do we have any question? Well, let me say, if you have a question or a comment, doesn't have to be a question, just a comment. You can either chat Melinda, who's our co-host today, or just raise your hand using the reaction button on the bottom of the Zoom screen, and Melinda will call on you.
Yes,
So,
I can tell. And I'm ready.
so Melinda, I need you while people are considering their comments and questions to.
You got one, but go ahead.
Well, I was going to ask you for a little fill-in, a little reaction.
Oh, Jack does have something to say. Just real briefly, I was thinking about a conversation I had with a relative who has a sibling, same-sex sibling that's a year older, and I know both of them pretty well. We were talking about his health struggles, and then we were also talking about his sibling. And it struck me that the difference in their approach and vision to life is so radically different that, again, their awareness, their ability to see just what you're talking about uh, is so radically different that I think some of it is almost gifted or involuntary in the way that they were able to develop their seeing of things. I know that's my point of view from a brain-based viewpoint. But I just wonder what you think. I think some of it's not volitional in the way that we're able to open up, as you're suggesting. Some people just can't. They're just very boxed in. Not much empathy, not much concern. That's just it.
Yeah, well, that's where they are. You could make an argument, I suppose, that that is somewhat genetically predisposed, um, or you could make an argument that it's their karma that causes them to be less aware or more aware. But unless somebody is developmentally disabled or brain damaged somehow, everybody has the capacity to awaken. Few people ever consider it. They don't know it's an option. It's not discussed. And then, even if it were in our schools, schools will teach concentration, but they do it badly. They say, pay attention, try harder, when in fact, concentration or attention is a relaxation skill. You don't try. The harder you try to concentrate or to be aware, the worse you'll do. Because you bring tension in, it triggers fight or flight, and it shatters and scatters attention to try to make an effort to do anything. So awareness, concentration is a relaxation skill. But there's also those who just carry so much negativity in their emotional baggage, so much fear, that they're afraid of things new and unknown. And they just don't want to know. That we hold on to our fear and our pain because it's familiar. And we complain about the pain, but we carefully pack it up in our emotional baggage and carry it with us from place to place because it's familiar, and anything new, even if it contains the promise of wonderful and free and exciting and fun, it's too new to deal with. And I can't do that, and I don't want to do that, and I'm afraid to do that. And bartender, another beer, you know. Okay.
Yes, yeah. It just seems like, using this one person as example, they're so locked in. I used to say to them, stop and look at who you are. It's worth it. Stop and examine your life. I, the old saying, you can lead a horse to water. I guess that's the best.
Yeah.
We just realize that maybe we're the lucky ones, not in a conceited way, but just in the ability to value being here and doing this work.
Well, you know the answer to you can lead a horse to water but can't make him drink
Right.
is you make him thirsty.
Oh, okay.
So that's the challenge. And in that way, just to be a model of what it means to be awake and mindful.
Yeah, that's all we can do, really. The
Yeah,
best we can do. Yeah, I
yeah,
totally do. Want me to read Jack's question or his comment?
yes.
It's a deep one. That life is a dream suggests consciousness is primary, which is what Max Planck, the originator of quantum physics, said is the case.
He did indeed. He's one of the preeminent quantum physicists and said consciousness is fundamental, which I absolutely believe. It's the only thing that's real. Um, and again, Tolstoy said the same thing, and many other great thinkers, writers, philosophers. Tolstoy said, love is the only thing that's real. What we need to recognize and become better at understanding is that in a spiritual context, love, Judeo Christian Islamic love, is the consciousness of Eastern philosophy. It's awareness of our experience. That's what consciousness is, to be aware of our experience through thought and perception of the appearance of things. Behind thought is awareness. Behind emotion is awareness. Or not. you know, some varying degree of awareness. Behind our speech, behind our behavior, how aware are we? Oops, I shouldn't have said that. Boy, I have lots of examples of that being on the radio. Things that I said, I got excited, I said I would give anything to take it back. Whoops. Didn't mean to say that. That didn't sound, it sounded right till I said it, and then it came out wrong. Wish I could reel that one back in. But of course, then you get better and better at monitoring your speech and your behavior. Jack, you want to unmute and follow up on that?
Yeah, as you were, first of all, this is I think a really great and interesting subject. And as I was thinking about it, first of all, I have in my own head the modern scientific materialist view, which just doesn't go away entirely. And in that view, you can't have things that are in quote miraculous. Like you can't have miraculous healings, which are well documented. There's just thousands and thousands of cases of people who had bodies riddled with cancer who the next day didn't.
Right.
Now, so we'll go, oh, it's spontaneous healing. Well, yeah, but there's no physical explanation. That many cells cannot change overnight. Healing takes time. But in these cases, very often what happens is people have some kind of confrontation with what you might call higher consciousness. Their dream is interrupted with a higher dream or a different dream, and then the outer world, material world, changes in accordance, which would again suggest that at least in some cases the consciousness is primary, and it can actually completely override what we think is going to be possible by what we know of the material circumstance, which actually gives me a lot of hope, because when I look at the world, I become very quickly depressed, and just looking at it sort of logically, I can't see any way out of the mess we're in. However, I do know that there are new things that come into consciousness. I was in the 60s. There was something going on there that was consciousness. And it was changing a lot of people with a rapidity that's just you wouldn't think possible. I think things can change because I think people can wake up. And I think when people wake up, things actually will change. So that there is hope because life is a dream. And we can dream a better dream.
Indeed. Once well said.
Barry has a comment.
Let me respond to that, and then we'll go to Larry. I had a friend who I came to know quite well in just a few years. He's since passed away. A medical doctor who was active in a group called Physicians for Social Responsibility. It was basically anti-war doctors who said, as healers and those who take an oath to do no harm, we can't stand by silently and allow the war machine that is America and NATO to go around waging war all around the world unnecessarily. These ridiculous police conflicts that escalate, and hundreds and thousands of people suffer and die. So they're anti-war medical doctors, and he had a dinner at his home, and he one evening and kindly invited me to attend. And it was all doctors. It was all medical doctors, a room full of medical doctors and me, basically. Maybe 12 people at a dinner. We sat at this big long table and started talking about this and that and the other thing. And because I was the only one there who was not a physician, a lot of questions got directed at me. What do you do? I do a progressive talk show on ABC and yada yada. And we got around to talking about, or I did, the mind-body connection. Conversation just sort of evolved to it. And boy, the atmosphere in the room got real tense until one of them spoke up and challenged me directly and said there's no such thing. I hadn't even begun to make a case for nutrition affecting health. I'm sure they would have rejected that too. It was just the idea that your mind, the way you think, your emotional nature, or lack of exercise, whatever. These are factors in your overall health. And again, at least half of the doctors in this room, and probably more, bristled at that whole concept. And one spoke up and challenged me directly, and I said very simply, then tell me about placebo effect. And that was the end of the conversation. We went off and talked about football or something at that point. They just didn't, I had a similar conversation years later with a veterinarian who looked at me and said, we were talking about mind-body connection, and he said, that's not true. Drugs do what they do. It's all chemistry. It's just the way the body reacts to the chemistry, and the body responds to the drugs that are administered. And I said the same thing. Tell me about placebo effect. Because even your household domestic dogs and cats will respond to care, even if you don't do anything, but love them up and pet them and kiss the boo-boo and care for them. They respond to that as if you were administering drugs. And took some communication classes in college where they talked about a similar kind of phenomena with workers and productivity. And all they did was paint the office where the workers were working, and just by a new applying a fresh coat of paint, their productivity went up because they thought people cared about them. And there's, I don't know why this isn't so obvious at this point, but many people prefer to live as a helpless victim or an effect of a life that's being done to them. And they're terrified when you begin to suggest that we are participants in that. So, placebo effect will stop them dead, Jack.
I'll remember that.
Larry, go ahead.
Well, I want to talk about the process of waking up and how our experience has a huge impact on what that means. Using an example, I'm the oldest of my parents' four sons, and the next oldest is 3 years younger than me. And we had the same physical parents, but we had dramatically different experiences in growing up. I was the first child, so my parents experimented on learning to be a parent. They didn't know what that meant except to follow their parents' examples, which were not really very good, but they did the best they could. But then, but there was only me, whereas my brother, he grew up with an older brother, and I taught him a lot of the things that I learned growing up. So he had a different path growing up, even though we were in the same house. My father changed jobs and made a
We're losing you, Larry. You're breaking up.
more money. So our economic well-being was much different when we were growing up at those formative years. So, oh, sorry, did I lose you altogether?
A little
Hello?
bit. You sound better now.
Okay, well, I'm having problems with my internet. I gotta talk to them on Tuesday. But making a long story short, I had a radically different formative year experience than my brother, and so now we both, I think, feel like we are awake, but we are radically different people. And he's, corporate CEO, and he has a lot of different opinions and views than I do, but we both think that we're awake. But so I just want to inject the idea that the formative year experience has a lot to do with how we view the world and our place in it and what it means to
Yeah.
be awake. So I just don't throw that in there.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think that's a really good point. My response is twofold. Number one, there are relative degrees of being awake, and then awake of around your own particular karma and your perception of the world, your particular values. I would say he may be equally awake to you, but his values are different than your values. His priorities are different. But the second part of this, I think, is that there are levels or degrees of awakening beyond wherever any one of us find ourselves. There is no there. Uh, like enlightenment, awakening is not a destination or a place where you can say, now I'm fully awakened. Or Scientologists have a term, clear, where they get clear. But it's always one more class away, and you got to spend another $3,000 to get there. So, ultimate awakening is something. Ultimate awakening is a thing, and there is a consensus of gurus and teachers and mystics and philosophers that ultimate awakening is the understanding that awareness, as Jack said, and as we've talked about before, that consciousness is fundamental. That at the most primary level, reality is our ability to perceive it. It's the consciousness behind the veil. Our knowing of experience through thought and feeling, that's consciousness. And it is a variable. I have many experience. Let's say I acknowledge the level, my understanding of the level at which I am a conscious, sentient human being, and yet today I will have varying experiences of being more or less consciousness throughout that day. So, a lot of background noise. So I'm gonna. Anyway, we're at 12:30. Mindy, anything else before we? Larry, I think that may be you. If you want to mute your, yeah, that'll help. Mindy, anybody else before we run?
There is not, yeah, I think DD Feldy wants to say something. Is that right? You need to unmute.
Yes, yes. I just wanted to throw into the mix the two things. One, the Native American position or belief that, well, not all Native American, but most cultures have a belief that dreaming and awake time, there's a tremendous overlap, but essentially there's no difference, and that we are in a dream state at all times. It's just when our body is asleep, it's just more there. That was one point, and the last point was you mentioned earlier about having ideas that we didn't know we had, or being aware of things either through dreams or through just thinking and consciousness that we didn't have. And many times I think this idea of the collective consciousness, the idea that there is this giant universe of people that have lived before us and continue to live, beings, not just people, and they influence so much of what we are and what we think. You know, sometimes we're just not aware of it until suddenly there it is. You know, that those were the 2 points I wanted to make.
Both excellent points. Thank you very much. While you were speaking of the first about the indigenous people of the Americas, I was thinking also about the Aboriginal dream time, which is a kind of a trance state. They can run for hours and hours and hours and not even be tired because they just go into a kind of a runner's high or a trance state that they call dream time. So indigenous people, those who live close to the earth, seem to have greater awareness of this just by virtue of the fact that they are in nature, and we've paved it over, so we lose touch with it. And then the second point about the collective, I think, is also an excellent point. It reminds me of the model of the pendulum, which we haven't talked about in over a year, but it's a very rich model, because while the bottom of a pendulum is free to swing left and right, forward and back, around and around, back and forth, the top of the pendulum is fixed and unmoving. And it's almost akin to the idea of having a single unified source that expresses itself into a multiplicity. But the point being, as you move up the string that connects the plumb of the pendulum to its source, to the fixed unmoving top, as you move up that string, the variability becomes less and less. You approach unity. And I think the idea of the oversoul on its own plane, living in groups. In theosophy, there is a trinity of that corresponds to the other trinities, like Father, Son, Holy Spirit, or mental, emotional, physical, the lower correspondence, spirit, consciousness, matter. This pendulum, in the same way, sort of suggests that between the one and the many are groups, soul living in ashrams, or you remember the Led Zeppelin album, Houses of the Holy. And this may be another way of looking at the Akashic records or Jung's collective unconscious, and that we can stand open and receptive through our intuition and our contemplations to information from these higher planes. Why not? And that could help account for the aha experience of thoughts arriving full blown. Without being considered, they arrive as if they've already been thought out. And it's a wondrous experience, and I'm really glad you brought it up. So thanks for both of those points. Wow, great class today. Thank you very much. And hope you'll make it a point again to join us live whenever possible, or to listen to us on YouTube or the audio podcast. All of it's commercial free and free to you. Ageless Wisdom Mystery School. If you will subscribe and subscribe, like, and comment. Review the podcast on Apple or Podchaser. Both accept reviews. And my book is Fearless Intelligence. Be sure and get a copy if you haven't already. And I'd love a review on Amazon. For some reason, 5 of my Amazon reviews disappeared. I wrote to them and they ignored me. I don't know. I don't know where they went. But it's not an ego thing. It really drives our position in keyword searches if we have more reviews on the book, Fearless Intelligence. And it's only $20 and well worth it, I think. And I've lowered the price of the ebook. The Kindle version, the ebook version, is I think only $6 now. So you can get the ebook version for next to nothing, and then review it on Amazon. Even if you buy it elsewhere, you can review it on Amazon. Thank you so much for being here. Namaste, aloha, salam. Please unmute and say thank you and goodbye to your neighbors, and we'll see you next Sunday. So long.
Thank you,
Michael.
Okay.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you, Michael. Everybody have a wonderful week. Take care.
Happy Labor Day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Michael. Take care.
Thanks,
Aloha,
Kasha.
everybody.
Have a good day, Michael.
Thank you.
Thanks,
So long,
Michael. Thanks, everybody else. Bye.
So long, friends. Happy Labor Day. Okay, Mindy?
Are you still recording?
No.
I only got my little red buttons on.
Well, we're still connected, but